Hi, everyone. Today, I want to talk to you about artists that work around the topic of climate change. Zaria Foreman, Xavier Cortada, and Olafur Eliasson have all done projects concerning themselves with climate change, but in very different ways. The common thread is that they all want to get you to think about what's happening with our world and engage some emotion and personal experience in it. So I brought a slideshow to show you a little bit about what they've done. So here are the artists I brought today. Zaria Foreman on the lower left. On top with the green flag is Xavier Cortada, and on the right is Olafur Eliasson. Zaria Foreman is an American artist living and working in New York State. This is one of Zaria Foreman's pastel drawings. These are giant. And she started doing this after going on trips with her mother, who was a fine art photographer who went to remote and far flung places to photograph them. And they went on a trip to Greenland. So she started working from photographs she took just based on the beauty of the place. Her mother had planned an expedition to Greenland of artists and photographers, but she died before they could complete that trip. So Zaria did that trip on her own. That's when she first got interested in the melting of the icebergs and the rising sea level and effects that that has. She wants to get the viewer involved in the emotion of the subject by seeing these drawings and the beauty of them and the size, and getting people to think about these places that they may not see in person. So I have a video here where she talks a little bit about her experience making her work and what she hopes it will achieve.
Just listening to scientific facts or reading articles in the newspaper, it doesn't necessarily hit home, I think, as much as an image can. And that can be photography, that can be a painting, it can be a drawing. These places that I'm visiting are spectacular, and so I want to represent them honestly and in that way and show their beauty, but also a hint of what's happening underneath. With the Greenland body of work, the ice is melting at a very rapid pace. So there's like a little light shimmering on literally water covering the ice. So you actually see it melting. For the Maldives work, there's the clear, shallow water essentially swallowing the island, and you can see the sand underneath. So that to me represents, what's happening there. So it's important for me, for my art, to bring that awareness to people and play some small part, if any, if I can. Finding ways to communicate the climate crisis in a creative way, finding ways to communicate it in an emotional way, for me is all about creativity.
Olafur Eliasson is a Danish Icelandic artist who is working now, and he's an installation artist. He makes experiences for you to be in and to feel that you might have some emotion about the topic or something based on your experience, and you would learn more about that. And he works with a lot of scientists and specialists in different fields. This is a series that he did over 20 years, the Glacier Melt series, and he documented the melting of the glaciers in Iceland, where he lived. And you can see the picture on the left is the glacier from 1999, and the picture on the right is the same glacier in 2019. So he documented many glaciers and shows these works in galleries so that people can see with their own eyes the obvious differences that's happened over the past 20 years. The Ice Watch project that he did is really interesting. So this is an installation, which basically means he created an experience and he installed something somewhere else. So he took calved icebergs that broke off of the main glacier and are floating freely in the sea. He took them and moved them. He brought them to Paris, to London, and installed them there so people could experience them. Here's pieces of the icebergs in London outside the Tate Modern, and people can come up and touch them and feel them. He said, I think it matters for people to actually put their ear to the ice and suddenly realize that it has a very subtle cracking, popping, crisp noise because the melting releases pressure bubbles that have been stuck in these for 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, there was 30% less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So the smell of the ice blocks should be the smell of the air from 10,000 years ago. So these are the kind of things that he'd like you to think about when you're experiencing them for yourself. And you can walk around, you can see them melting. So that's something you can think about the glaciers melting. It connects you to that experience. And you can just see the wonder and the curiosity and how people are connecting and learning while experiencing this installation that he had. He wanted to give feelings to something that seems far away and abstract. So when scientists talk about climate change, sometimes you don't know, what does that mean, or how does it affect me? And this makes you really think about it through a personal experience. Xavier Cortada is an American artist of Cuban descent who lives in South Florida. And he does a lot of different kinds of work, but this is a piece that he did in the community where he lives. So South Florida is prone to flooding, and it's getting worse each year because of the rising seawaters and climate change. So he made these yard signs that you put on your front lawn in your front yard, much like a political sign, a proposition sign. These ones say how many feet until your house right there, till that spot is underwater. And this is his studio. This is 8 feet. So once the seawaters rise 8 feet, that's going to be waterfront right there. And he got people in his neighborhood, he distributed them and got them to put them in their yards. So he engaged the community and educated the community, brought people together around how far underwater is your house going to be? And people learned about the topic and they worked together to think of solutions. And I have a little video here that shows you a little bit about what he did with the community.
I called it the Underwater Homeowners Association. I could have just as easily called it the Sea Level Advocacy Group, you know what I mean? But what I wanted was to organize a folks of people who wouldn't be involved in politics or in environmental issues to take ownership of a problem. Like if your neighbor sees a number 6 in front of your house, your neighbor knows that you too are a number 6. So you're no longer a Democrat or Republican or an anti-science or pro-science person. You're both literally standing at the same elevation. So what I was trying to do is just shine a light on this whole process. There were realtors who were upset about me doing this because they thought it would have a negative impact on their sales and their property values. And in my mind, all I kept on thinking about was, so where's your ethical duty? So it's okay for you to sell a house and you sort of hide, you know, what you don't want the buyer to know.
That's Hialeah, right? 3, okay.
What did you do?
Oh, I just, oh my God!
Yes, it is an art project, but I think that the strength of the project is being able to bring people together.
I'm hoping that you will all make signs today, and then hopefully put those in your yards, and then have a chance to talk to your neighbors about them when they say, "What is that funny sign in your yard?"
The yard signs that he created, he actually painted on watercolor paintings that he did on a trip to Antarctica while he was a fellow with the National Science Foundation Artists and Writers Program. So he's actually painted those watercolor paintings with glacier melt water. Another part of this project was painting the water level rise at some of the intersections in his community of Pinecrest, Florida. And this was called Elevation Drive. And at each intersection, Cortada and local high school students painted the number of feet that it would be underwater. And with this project, which he called Underwater HOA, he developed an HOA, which is a community of people that come together living in a certain neighborhood. And people could vote on things, but they could only vote with proof of elevation. So the only people who could vote on these pressing issues concerning rising seawaters were the people who would be directly affected by them, which is a really interesting idea. So his project has many different aspects. There's the fine art, there's the community engagement, there's spreading the word, there's education, and there's a project moving forward. It's created out of his own community where he lives, trying to raise awareness right there at home. So you can see these three artists work in three very different ways, but they have a common goal of trying to educate people and raise awareness through an emotional connection to the issue at hand, making people aware of what's happening in the larger world through bringing something connected that to you in your home or connecting it to what's going to happen in the area where you are. So what I'd like you to do today is to try to think about a project or a visual piece of art that you could do that would connect people and inform people about an issue here in your town. You could make a poster. If you wanted to work on something like climate change, you could show what would Alameda look like in 50 years. There's maps online. You can look and see how high the waters will rise. Will your house be oceanfront or bayfront? It could be. You could think of a project that you could do around town, like Xavier Cortada's yard signs. I have something here that I started working on that was a sort of a rough sketch of a map of New York City and the rising coastline over time. So the current coastline is out here, and then it moves in here and it moves in here over about 100 years. So New York City is going to get smaller and smaller. So this is just a rough sketch of an idea that I was playing with, trying to educate people and raise awareness about climate change. You can do whatever it is that is inspiring you. And if you want to think of a project like Olafur Eliasson, you could write down a series of instructions, like what would that project be? How would it happen? Sometimes art projects start out with just writing, like I want to do this idea and I'm going to get the ice from here and I'm going to move it over here, and something like that. So I can't wait to see what you come up with.